Welcome back to lesson 2 in our energy unit. In lesson 1, we talked about different forms of energies, and today we're going to talk about how those energies can transform or change from one form to another. So this is going to be a really quick lesson, but just a reminder from lesson 1, we know that energy is all around us and it comes in many, many forms. And we're going to talk about a lot of these forms of energy in this unit. But chemical energy and nuclear energy, we've introduced them, but we're going to highlight on those a little bit later when we get into chemistry. So mechanical energy, if you'll remember from our last lesson, is just the sum of kinetic and potential energy. Kinetic energy, remember, is moving energy, and potential energy is what we call stored energy. And then there's two forms of potential energy. We have gravitational potential energy, which is going to be found in objects that are elevated above Earth's surface. And then elastic potential energy, which is stored energy when something that's elastic is pulled back, similar to like a slingshot. Heat energy is the type of energy that we find when we have anything that produces heat. Electrical energy is moving electrons. This is also known as electricity. We also have light energy and sound energy. Anything that produces a light would have light energy. Sometimes this is called radiant energy. And then anything that produces a sound, of course, is going to be called sound energy. Chemical energy is just when atoms bond or break apart. So think chemical reaction. Electromagnetic energy comes in the form of waves via the electromagnetic spectrum. So we're going to get into that in this unit. We also have magnetism. We're going to talk about in this unit a good bit. And then nuclear energy, we find this in the nucleus of the atom. And since nuclear energy has to do with the atom's nucleus, we're going to talk about that when we get into chemistry, and we'll spend several weeks talking about the atom. Okay, so something important for you to know, you need to be able to identify forms of energy. Remember, objects can possess more than one energy at a time as well. So let's say that before we move further. But you need to understand an important principle of physics, and that's the law of conservation of energy. And this law says that energy is neither created nor destroyed, but it can change forms. So it can go from kinetic energy back into potential energy. You can have something that has a form of mechanical energy, and that's converted into sound energy or light energy or heat energy. And so in addition to being able to identify forms of energy, you also need to be able to identify transformations of energy. So I'm going to walk you through some examples of how energy can transform from one form to another. So if you look at this example of the apples on a tree, those apples are just hanging on the tree. So we say they have potential energy. They're not moving, but they have the potential to move. So that's what we call stored energy, specifically gravitational potential energy, because they are hanging above Earth's surface. Now, when an apple falls off of the tree, while it's falling, it's in motion. So we say that potential energy was converted into kinetic energy. Of course, when the apple falls to the ground and just kind of rolls around and then stops, that kinetic energy is converted back into potential energy. Now, we know that eventually that apple is going to sit there and either it's going to be eaten or it's going to rot. Either way, it's going to undergo some sort of chemical energy, either in the form of decomposition, or if an animal comes up and eats it, the digestion process is a chemical energy. So you can start to see how energy can change from one form to another. But that energy never disappears. It's never created. And so that's just what the law of conservation of energy says. Here's another example. When we have a battery that's not in use, we say that battery has potential energy. That energy is just being stored. Now, when I take that battery and stick it in my flashlight and turn my flashlight on, there's a chemical reaction that happens inside the battery that pushes electrons out. So that potential energy is converted into chemical energy. And then once those electrons start to move, we call that electrical energy, which I didn't put up here, but that is another form that's present in this example. And then, of course, when the light comes on, that's going to produce some light energy. There's going to be a little bit of heat present, so some thermal energy. So you can see how energy transforms here as well. Another good example is when a person eats food and their body digests the food. Digestion is a form of chemical energy. And if you've had biology or a life science before, you know that the product of that is ATP, otherwise known as energy. So we have the ability to run and play and do things because of the chemical energy from digestion. So lots of energy transformation happening there. Here's another example. During a volcanic eruption, heat energy is going to be transferred through lava to the surface of Earth. There's lots of different energies that are present when a volcano is erupting. You've got sound energy, light energy, definitely heat energy, chemical energy. And then eventually that lava is going to stop flowing. It's going to cool, and then it's just going to kind of sit there as a rock. And so all of that energy is converted into like a potential energy. So you can see that energy transformation here as well. This picture I showed you in the last lesson, and I asked you, what this had to do with energy. And I don't know, maybe you guessed correctly, but so there's a lot of different energy transformations that happen here. But if you just want to look at the overall big picture, there's probably some sort of water reservoir behind these gates, maybe a huge lake or some body of water that's there as a water source. So when the gates are closed, we say that the water in the reservoir has stored potential energy. And then when the gates open and all that water rushes in, that potential energy is converted into kinetic energy in the form of moving water. Both of those are considered mechanical energy. And then from there, all kinds of things happen. If we were standing here, we would hear sound. So we could say sound energy. The fact that we see this, the light's reflected back to our eyes, we could say that's radiant or light energy. But that moving water probably is going to power something. So in the form of electrical energy. So electrical energy is going to be present here as well. So lots of examples of energy and energy transformations in this picture. All right, so if you are in class, you're going to watch a video over energy transformations, and then you're going to draw your own example of energy transformations and use lots of arrows and terms. You're going to be really creative, and you're going to be graded on creativity and accuracy and visual appeal. And this is just going to kind of solidify some of the things that we've talked about. If you are in class and you're doing this, then make sure that you don't use one of the examples that I used in the lesson. Try to think of your own. There are tons. And then if you are not in class, then this is your assignment. So on the back of your notes for today, I want you to jot down 3 types of energy, any 3 of the ones that we've talked about. Jot down 2 ways that these energies affect your life. And then 1 word that comes to mind when you think of energy. And that will do it for the lesson over energy transformations. And I will see you in the next lesson.